way back in the mid-90s, I went to university and studied geology. That was pretty much, you know, my interest at the time. I still have a keen interest in geology. You know, at the time, I think I was dreaming of walking jungles and exploring the world and all that. And you know, I used to be quite sporty as well. I played rugby league for my local team, and more recently, I've actually played in the Dubai Sevens in a veterans team. So trying to keep fit and healthy. But you know, my career has been one of change. As I left university in the around about '96, the price of oil was low, which meant for somebody with a geology degree, finding work was actually really difficult. So I actually started working for McDonald's probably when I was about 15, you know, making burgers, that kind of thing. But I actually moved on to the graduate training program, which was a really good course, to be honest. If you know, I come away from the world where I was, you know, cooking burgers and so on and so forth. You know, I went into the world where I was running a multi-million-pound business with hundreds of employees. So quite a big responsibility and a huge learning experience for me as I started my career. I quickly moved into a role with Halliburton, where I was a geologist working on a mainly in Europe. Some of my colleagues travelled the world. I travelled the North Sea, which is cold. And from there, I actually moved into IT. Partially, you know, as one of my interests in life, IT's always been really strong. Before I went to university, I did an A-level, which is like one of a qualification in between the age of 16 and 18 in the UK, in computers and programming. So my life on the oil rigs, it turned out, part of that job was actually looking for a whole bunch of remote monitoring systems on an oil rig. So I naturally fell back into IT with a software house based in Liverpool, not far from where I live. And from there, I went into IBM Business Partners. I was a trainer for IBM for about 4 or 5 years, teaching something called PSSP, which is a parallel processing machine. If any of you probably won't remember this, but if any of you have come across a computer called Deep Blue that played chess, this was the kind of thing I used to teach, and it was really for things like modeling weather systems or nuclear weapons research, you know, all these gene processing, all these really big, heavyweight roles, you know, jobs that users do. From there, we moved on to Fujitsu, practice lead, looking after Unix and storage and account leadership. And eventually, I decided, rather than being an IT supplier for my entire life, a move to AstraZeneca to actually be the customer side of IT was a good thing. So in 2015, I came out to Chennai. From there, I landed on a Sunday evening, spent my day in the office on the Monday, and then spent the rest of the week in the hotel as the Chennai floods hit. And eventually, a 9.5-hour taxi out to Bangalore. I flew all of my team except me to Bangalore, I think on the day we arrived. I couldn't get a flight home for a couple of days, so I found myself in Bangalore for 2 or 3 days on my own, just wandering around the town. So I've seen part of Bangalore on my own. And then, you know, all of this is you know, just constant change. I'm married with 2 kids, 4 dogs, 4 fish, a hamster. You know, lots of change throughout my life. And just to finish off there, you know, at the age of 42, I took up the crazy sport of snowboarding, which is, you know, really designed for people with more bodies than I have, I think. But enough about me. Just, I really wanted to highlight that, you know, my entire life has changed from the beginning of you know, leaving university all the way through today. So many different changes have happened, leading to where I am today. So the first thing I really wanted to touch on was really change, and I suppose what it is and how we adapt to it, rather than IT, because I think that's probably an important part of any part of our lives. And I guess everybody in the call today, we've all recently started in university, and so right to Aberystwyth within Wales, moved away from home, moved into a house with a lot of people I never knew. You know, that was a big, daunting change at the time. But change is really important. You know, this quote here: the ability to successfully manage change has become one of the most important skills needed for personal happiness, the prosperity of organizations, and the health of the planet. Either an organization, ourselves, or as a society, difficult. It can be quite stressful. And I hope I can just pull some of the threads around this as we go forward. So change for me is something that happens to us. It's something that we don't necessarily have a control over, and it's something that's going to happen. You know, I've some of the changes in my life. They can be, you know, our own responses to quite emotional. Organizational changes can be quite emotional as well, because people are involved in that, and organizations build their own identities up, and changing those identities and changing the way an organization works can be quite difficult. You know, we go into a world where we don't have control. We are not certain of where we're going to go. It always takes a good while for any change to, I suppose, bed in, and ourselves and our organizations to adapt, or society to adapt. And one of the things that I found, I think, throughout my entire career in IT, is no matter what change is, some people, some organizations are quite resistant to change. So we need to have a mindset ourselves that can help us drive forward and take the best parts of the change forward, and really drive others around us and help people around us. So the other part of change is, you know, this right-hand side of the slide, transition. And that's about how we really react. Many changes, we always can feel that we're losing something. You know, even a positive change can, I think, bring a bit of loss with it. We change our identity when change happens. Again, true of organizations. Change and transition. So what do I mean by that? We don't just go from one state. You know, today I was a Unix guy. I didn't go from a Unix guy to being a cloud guy overnight. You know, I learned the different ways of working. I've learned how organizations change, and how IT changes around me by trying, to be honest. You know, the failure is quite important. It enables us to learn. It can be transformational. It can lead to development. But I think the key things there are, we need to be open to acting the change around us, and we need to be open to really position ourselves to learn from the changes we go through that change. As the quote says at the bottom here, you know, I have two options: step forward or grow, or step back into safety. Now, this is important to me. Having worked with a lot of colleagues over the years, find themselves, you know, deeply technical specialists, find themselves learning their niche, becoming very comfortable. But when asked to pick up a new role or new technology, they find that very stressful, and sometimes quite often make that change. They simply, my Unix guy who knows a particular flavor of Unix, for example, may never want to pick up a different Unix or Linux or a different way of working. And that's understandable because this change is scary. You don't want to pick up this new tool, take on the responsibility of running an organization's IT. They're critical to people's jobs, lives, profit, may be shaped to the ability to keep these systems up and running. And so that step into a new world, you're not as good as you were. You've got a new set of skills to learn. And that can be something that's just very scary. As I say, they feel that you're losing control, it's stressful, so on and so forth. So people can sit in this comfort zone. And the problem with doing that, you may be an expert, but you don't grow as much as you can. So I'd encourage everybody, I suppose, latch on to the new, learn where you can. Embed in your own life the process of learning and unlearning things so you can continually adapt and grow and really change the world, change yourself to the world around you. Now, again, the experience of change, just going back to that, a few of these quotes, I think, resonate, and they could resonate in many different ways, in many different situations where you're changing. This could be a house move, it could be a new job, it could be anything. But we need to, I think, learn through change and learn somebody who can adapt to change. And that through that, we can become leaders. We can really become valuable in an organization to allow organizations to go into these new directions, explore new markets, change the way they work and operate. And one of the big drives is this mission statement from Google. Google's mission statement to organize the world's information, make it universally accessible and useful, has driven pretty much everything that Google has done over the last 25 years. And as a result of this, a lot of technology is invented. One of the key things that Google do is give this technology to the open source, which of course means that anybody can then access this technology. And we've seen this with Amazon and Azure. They take in the best of that open source community and have driven change in their companies. And bizarrely, Google haven't gone into this cloud world until relatively recently. They were a late entry. They were a late entry to the search world as well. So is that a bad thing? Probably not. But their inventions, their ways of working, along with Amazon's and so on and so forth, have made enormous changes. Certainly, the 25 years or so of my career, it's incredible how the world has changed. So here's a really quick summary of what I see about the changes, the phases of transition I've spoken about. I first thought all start on the left with quite negative connotations. We don't want to change. We don't like change. Organizations quite often deny a change. They hope to hold a business model that's been working for them for the last 5, 10, 15 years. I'd argue I could see this right now in the automotive world. The Fords and so on of the world, you're making diesel and petrol engines. Meanwhile, Tesla have come along and have really changed that world. It's almost like organizations are in denial about making this change, and they don't want to make this change. I can understand why. They've got full of machines costing millions and millions of dollars to make petrol engine cars. But in reality, the change Tesla have brought has been that much of a sea change that the entire the entire industry is now changing. But it's difficult. Every single person who's worked on those cars, who's invented those, who's built a career around that. Of course, they feel a sense of loss. Their baby they've had at work is no longer there, and this comes onto this transition piece. For them, is it a loss of job? Is it a loss of the industry entirely? They don't necessarily know where to go now. They're worried. They're in doubt. They've been doing the wrong thing. It's such an uncertain spot. As we transition and figure out the new beginning, all of a sudden, to can step into a new world where they can invent these new cars, the electric cars, the hydrogen cars if they're better. And all of a sudden, you've got this new world of creativity in front of you. So you then understand it's a new way of working, a new way forward in the world where there's a lot of opportunity. And that's the exciting part of the change. If we can make ourselves change this way, we can change within our organization. People follow. People will join. People will understand where we're going, and that's all about communication. And you've probably heard about IQ, intelligence. There's emotion as well, EQ. Understanding how we react, how others react, helping them, coaching them. All these things are key parts in change management within an organization, and change leaders are really critical. That's just one of the parts of change that I can think of, where if we can get from that right hand, that left hand, that transition, the endings phase, and into the new beginnings phase, we're excited about that change, not meeting it with trepidation. So, enough about my quick overview of change. There's many hours more, and people have entire years on the topic. Onto some technology. So back in 1995, I would have been back in university at this point, still hitting rocks with hammers, looking at dinosaurs and all that stuff. Something happened at Stanford University. A product called Backrub. Backrub. That was the original name for Google. That was created in 1995. Now, I assume that Larry and team spent their time coming up with a name, and I think found it quite difficult to get rid of that name at the time because that was their baby. But it was Google search was renamed and became Google. In '98, 3 years later, $100,000 was invested by one of the founders from Sun Microsystems, a company now part of Oracle, one of the real biggest companies within IT in the late 90s, driving the internet forward. Link was officially born. In 2002, Yahoo tried to buy them for $3 billion. That's 4 years after some seed money was put into the organization. I remember time in IBM around about then. Somebody was saying, "Hey, have you seen this Google search?" Because it didn't have any ads on it. You just logged in and it found things. And it was clean. It was easy. It was quick to work. Where Yahoo was full of pop-ups and all that kind of stuff at the time. Today, Alphabet is worth just over $1.1 trillion. And Alphabet is Google's parent company now. They restructured a few years ago. So Google includes Google Search, Apps, Gmail, G Suite, Google Cloud Platform. Alphabet also has a lot of interests. So self-driving cars and Fitbits in there. All those kind of devices are in this large group of companies which have evolved. So, taking one thread, to organize the world's data, Google have had to invent technology. Back in 2002, the Google file system was born. It is, the first beginnings of a distributed file system that allowed data to be copied around the world. MapReduce and Bigtable came along. Dremel, which is BigQuery, was invented in 2008. Query is really quite a super technology. Being able to query massive data seconds. We then build more and more capabilities around that with an ML. Now, from the big table, we see objects in Apache. Things like Hadoop come out of this ways of working. And Hadoop has been adopted by Azure and AWS and IBM. Even within your own home, you could build a Hadoop cluster. And before, it's there to give us the access to these massive amounts of data. It allows Google to work around the world. We type in the box, we click a button, and Google search comes back in seconds. The amount of data that's being processed here is just mind-boggling, to be fair. If I went back to my first IT job, which is just off the left of this diagram, I spend my time with things called breakout boxes, trying to figure out what the wiring was within a cable so it could connect to together. We used to install hard drives into servers with a huge, maybe 2 gig of data. We buy servers. In fact, I remember one day my team decided they didn't want to pay, I think it was something like £400 to build a server for us, Patra. So it came in boxes. I think we had something about 500 boxes. The rack and the server itself was around full. It took 4 of us 4 or 5 days to build this. And we had a bag of screws at the end that we weren't sure of because there were no instructions. But we did that. That was a week's worth of effort for a team of 5 of us. Today, I could probably click a few buttons, type a couple of things at command line, and have 100 servers spun up and running in any of the clouds. So, this change, it's not just about computing faster and faster. It's about all the management around it and the ways of working that have changed. Now, at the same time this is happening, back in the late 90s, I had my mobile phone. I could play the Snake game on my Nokia 3310. I have an incredible phone in my pocket, to be honest. I can play games, I can do work, I can join Zoom. Everything has gotten much faster and easier. The fact I can have this conversation with you now over the internet, I couldn't dream of doing this 20 years ago. It just simply wasn't possible. But I was saying, Google have invented all these things here to really drive search capability and make sure that search works really close to us. To do that, they've built centers around the world. They have global presence with huge compute underpinning their infrastructure. I remember the first one they ever built was cobbled together from spare parts with Lego kind of blocks. Wasn't Lego, it's some competitor, but I'm sure you see the point. But there's a side effect of needing to process all data in the world to provide those search results quickly. which then became Twin and all those monetizing things of search. To be able to do that, they've had to develop massive amounts of power. They have specialist nodes for big data that run TPU, which is a specialist system just for running those really, really quick BigQuery things. Nobody else has. They have specialist nodes for Google Stadia, which came out recently. That's a compute platform used for playing games remotely. If you have a great internet connection, wonderful. It's nobody needs to buy a console anymore. The service that's always kept up to date. So they built these big computers and these data centers. Great. So what? They still have the problem of that GFS data, that big table data needs to be distributed around the world to be searchable. Me searching in London or New York or Tokyo or even Mumbai or Bangalore still needs to be quick, and it still needs to be pertinent that I can search anything everywhere and it be quick. And of course, Google's issue here is, how do I get that data through the world to enable that with this network? Google were the first, well, at the time, search provider, to be honest, to lay their own dedicated submarine cables around the world. It's a constantly growing capability, but this means that Google has by far the fastest network on the planet when it comes to point-to-point connections and throughput to enable these searches. So once they got this far, they now have huge computers, they have huge capabilities in networks, and they in with infrastructure, and companies started using this because it's so easy just to pick up a button, a virtual machine, connect to that virtual machine, and start doing work. I didn't need to go and buy hardware anymore. I didn't worry about my own network connections anymore. Microsoft, the same bus, the same change happened to Microsoft. They started moving into these cloud services. 5 used to be everybody ran their own Exchange servers. That's now jumped into the cloud. That changes the way we work. All of a sudden, when I have things in the cloud, it's really easy to share things. It's Google's equivalent, if you like, of Office 365. I find it much better, personally. But I can share across organizations. We can work on the same documents in real time. 300 people writing and commenting on a spreadsheet or a slide presentation. It's just incredible. I can work with somebody in India as easily as I can in the UK, and that was never the case. 20 years ago, I had to go somewhere, and this has been accelerated enormously by COVID. COVID has locked us all at home. Organizations have had this change forced upon them, and we've adopted the technology that has been there and changed our ways of working as a result. Previously people were, they wanted you in the office. All of a sudden, when you had no other option, people have adapted and I think changed the new way of, well, it's taken a while and it's been difficult for a lot of people. But I think, like Wipro, we're certainly there. I no longer worry about needing to be in a meeting in Helsinki later in the week. I simply dial into a meeting like this, and we can have, a real conversation online. I can be quicker talking to people around the world. Okay, time zones, which causes me different issues, but these are changes that have been forced on companies from that world. And we've simply, transitioned, and we're still transitioning, I think, to the new ways of working. as what works and what doesn't work with these remote tools, they are changing. But I think we've really got way over the, if you like, the hump of this will never work. It's been forced on us, and those of us who have embraced that change, you know, we've really started the opportunities and the new ways of working as really bringing the world together more and allowing us to address problems with, I suppose, more cooperation. And I hope, to be honest, this one way of working that everybody's now figured out will spill into our next big challenge. Climate change challenge is going to bring lots and lots of change on us that we have to adapt with. And I hope the world can work better together as a result. But, so, as I was saying, all of Google's platforms they've built over the years have really been designed for huge amounts of scale, huge numbers of users. You know, look at Android, if I looked at G Suite, just those two products every single day have billions and billions of users and queries. And not once can I think of a time that I've typed into Google, search hasn't worked, unless of course my internet connectivity's failed. I can search my email. I can add devices and excuse me. Yeah, there's just so much change here that is enormous in what Google have done. Side of the product list are the automation to allow people to act at massive scale. Operational procedures, things like SRE, which is system readiness engineering, reliability engineering, sorry. So reliability engineering, when these systems get to this huge scale, is absolutely critical. Google's mantra is they only want to see a ticket once. They don't want to see a repeat of that ticket ever. So they have some really weird things on the website you would never think of. There's an interesting case study within Google, and I think it's on their public site somewhere. Sorry, I should have dug that out for this. But they had a network issue, and the network issue was the network was dropping packets. Some every now and then it would go slow, and they eventually traced the network issue to being an overheating CPU and the CPU throttling its speed down and unable to keep up with the traffic flow. Okay, most people and most industries, in my experience, would call the vendor and said, replace the CPU. Google did, they replaced that entire network, but then they went more and more into the logs. They really started digging and digging and digging. Now, what they found was overheating because the cooling system wasn't working properly. It was a liquid-cooled system, and the liquid wasn't getting to the CPU to cool down the CPU. Next question, why? The rack the system was held in wasn't quite level. Why is it not level? The data center floor's level. It shouldn't be a problem. What they actually found is they dug into this issue more and more and more, and asking that question, why? One of the wheels, base of the rack, had broken, and it had tipped the rack forward about an inch, not much. And because this one wheel had failed and caused this issue, Google actually replaced all of the wheels, all racks in all of the data centers in the world to make sure that problem never happened again. As a result, that problem never happened again. So that's their approach to this. They've changed their operational procedures, recognize that They're small issues, a wheel, where before this would cause, maybe one server to have a problem, one application to have a problem. All of a sudden now, once they're operating this, this causes outages and issues across many, many companies. So they want to make the products as absolutely reliable as they can be. And this is where things like CIDI, DevOps, NoOps, all these ways of working have changed within IT as a whole. No longer looking after one server, one application. We're figuring out how to work at this scale. We're figuring out how to be more effective and faster. I mean, it's a really super way of working. So, when we talk about the technology, what has really changed? Well, a lot. But for me, a lot of things have changed in ways that I would never have thought. Ask me this question 25 years ago, and I would never have thought the cloud opened. We had virtualizations in servers, and that was really about getting more out of the hardware. Could I imagine that I could run a big, a machine learning model to look at pictures and classify the pictures? There's a famous one, hot dog or not hot dog. But I did a course with Google about 3 or 4 weeks ago, which involved training a model to identify clouds in photos. At the end of it, I could find a picture. I could take a picture of the sky actually and upload it into Google, and it would tell me the type of cloud. Not in a million years, but I'd imagined that I would be capable of doing that 20 years ago. Never mind actually doing it today. So the big question is everything has become service driven. We connect to APIs. Okay, not everybody's there, but in this picture, this could have been me at work 25 years ago in IT. A whole bunch of components on a desk or something. You can still do that, obviously, but now I have YouTube. I have that pooled information, whereas previously I'd be looking at magazines or books, maybe some rudimentary, website. Right now, there's chat groups, so much information out there that's readily available through everything that's happened. APIs are there, CIDI, which is a way of deploying apps at scale where you can replace running systems and wave that through your running production on the outage. Agile is a different way of running projects now. It used to be a waterfall method. You literally walk through a set of tasks to get from the start to the end of a project. Now they fail. We try a different thing. It works, so we go forward with that. Very different way of working. On demand has become just there. I used to wait for my weekly show. Whatever TV show a series I watched when I was a kid, and you'd wait for that day in the week. Well, now I can just open Netflix and watch it. It's just there. Same. I used to buy CDs as a teenager. Now I just listen to music that I want to on demand. I have, to all intents and purposes, an unlimited amount of computer at my fingertips right now. I can spin up a 500 node compute workload in Google to do this AI ML job. It would run. It might take 2-3 hours to do what I've asked of it, and then I would have a bill at the end of it. And Google might charge me $100, but I've just access to, maybe 5,000 CPUs. There's no way I could ever afford it before. Now, we can just play at work. It doesn't cost money. It's really easy to do. so many innovative things right now in IT. And just to give you another, I suppose, flavour of how this is, you know, this graph represents how long things have taken to reach 50 million. You know, the telephone, 75 years before 50 million of us had one. Cars took 62 years to, you know, for 50 million users. Now, draw something, cool little app. My kids love it. You know, 50 days. Go 19 days before 50 million people had that. And, you know, these are, it's the viral app. It's just incredible that these things can now just explode because we have this so connected world. It's truly amazing to me, to be honest. Obviously, I've grown up from the years where in my pre-teens, I had a small computer. It had 32 kilobytes of memory. And I had to type in programs from magazines so that I could have, you know, a game. Then one day came along and we could load these things on a floppy disk. And then the hard drive came along. I had one that was 20 megabytes. And that was a big hard drive at the time. So now, you know, we're talking terabytes. You know, I have 2 terabytes up in Google Cloud for, you know, £7, I guess $10 a month. But I think now, you know, the technology is just super fast and super amazing. Pokemon Go is actually quite an interesting. Inside of Pokemon Go, Google Maps and Google Ads are actually embedded. And what Nintendo did is they actually sold ad revenue for retailers. So you would find, you know, the training gyms, the weird creatures, you know, the rare ones you wanted to collect, they were at shop fronts or they were at the back of a store. So without people when they were playing the game, you know, great, they were getting people up and walking. But a lot of the tools in there and the way you were driven to the various locations was actually driven by, you know, companies buying ad revenue, getting you into their store. But again, that would never have happened 20 years ago. We just didn't have the technology to do that. The technology is great, but within all of this, you know, we people are probably the most important part. Within an organization, if, you know, as Branson says here, the employees are the important part. We are the things that make this, we are the things that people sell to, you know. We really have to make care of people within organizations, that emotional connection, all people's needs. And I think that's becoming more and more and more critical because, you know, the people who drive change, it's people. Technology on its own isn't going to make the world a better place necessarily. We have to guide it. We have to do the right thing. Now, these are the 5 cultures within Wipro. You know, we're full to one another. We need to be responsive. Don't ignore that email. Pick up the phone. We're always with one another. You know, reinforcing those, I suppose, those social bonds, but also getting people to understand our point of view and what we want. We demonstrate stewardship. You know, we make decisions. We say we're going to do something, and we deliver them. We stand behind them, and we build trust by doing all these things. And we have this mindset of growth. You know, going back to what I said earlier about change, getting to that world where the new is new, where the opportunity is something we can embrace and grow. We strive towards that. The YouTube link here, really good link around that. It's about 8-10 minutes. Definitely worth reading. Sorry, watching. We don't read YouTube. But what all this has changed, as I've said, I can now do these things on scale that I could never do. I could do all these things at such a small price that we can play, we can try. Small teams, individuals can do huge things. Google Cardboard, I don't know if you've seen it. That's Google Cardboard is a thing you grab your phone, you can put it inside a cardboard box, and you can do the 3D virtual reality. That was created by a French engineer, David Coles and Damien Henry. That was done in the Google 20% time, the time that they gave engineers to plan projects that they like, that they want to do. You know, it gives people a chance to do something that they find interesting. It gives people that free time to find that changing, innovative work that they enjoy and drive themselves. But it became, it became a huge hit for Google. It's in all of their virtual reality stuff now. It's within their software kits. Massive change. And if we enable people to do this through our culture within organizations, we allow people to try things and fail. We unearth these new ideas. We find we have a more fulfilling time at work. You know, if I could work 20% of my time on a project that I find interesting, but that's how innovation works sometimes. You know, people always have the answer, but my IT answer for something may be applicable in medical terms. An idea from the medical world about how viruses spread, those things have been taken into computer networks to allow antivirus software and security software to understand how computer viruses spread, because they also propagate in a similar way. But, changing the culture to enable that collaboration, that respectful, that, all that, the things I've just spoken about, allow these nuggets of bliss, if you like, to shine in an organization. So I think for me, I wouldn't worry about, where I am maybe. It's about where can I, what could I do? And the big changes for me, just in the last 20 years, they're getting faster and faster. And I wonder, what could be true? What can I do? What could I see in 5 years? Because those changes are going to be quicker, and they're going to be driven by lots of external things. I say climate change is one of the biggest things that is going to happen right now and for the rest of our lives. So how do we adapt to that? What could we do to, bring that new product, that new innovation, the secret sauce that helps fix it? Or, what can we do? What can we do with IT? The opportunities are huge. So I think on that note, I think we're okay time-wise. I think we've got 5 minutes left if there's any questions. I hope that's been useful.
Yes. The session was quite very interesting. Guys, if you have any questions, please do ask, put it in the chat box or in the Q&A section, so that Sir will address it one by one. So I think I have a question. I will read it for you. What is the role of, this is by Gaurav, what is the role of communication technology in the business world? What communication technology should be the company using? According to you, what are the specificities of an IT infrastructure department compared to the other IT department in any other companies in the business world?
I'm not sure I heard all that, I'm afraid. I think I got what is the role of IT infrastructure, and sorry, I didn't hear the end of the question.
Okay, he is telling how the IT departments would differ from company to company in corporate.
So how does it change? So for me, IT, going back again, years, and I think they still exist. IT can often be seen as a cost center, which means we don't actually give anything to the top line of the organization. A lot of IT projects will to reduce bottom line. That's changing. As organizations have realized the value of data, we're moving to that world where IT needs to provide insights to the business from their data. Lots of islands of data out there. That's one of the key drivers. And if we can move into that world, we provide the value to the top line of an organization. We move IT away from that cost center to being a profit center. Where I worked in the IT department previously in infrastructure, you would deliver the core function, email, things like that, things that just help people do their jobs. Now, I think that's where we're changing now. We are becoming more and more enablers to allow the business greater insight into their data, to maybe automate some of that in the actions, so we can take systems of record, and the information around the world, and we can combine to start answering the questions for the business, to drive better decisions, better ways of working, maybe insights into the market. I think the question in terms of what communication technology should the company use, I don't think there's one answer. Face-to-face communications, these kind of WebEx is great, Zoom, sorry. But I think it's not just about communication, it's around collaboration. And that for me is where things like G Suite come in. I can collaborate documents, Google Sheets, you can ask natural language questions to, and you can combine the technology in the back end. So I could ask, Google Sheet with voice, I can talk to it, and it will give me an answer. But the IT infrastructure itself, I think they now are very much focused on, how do I deploy things into cloud? But the very, very next question that comes along is how do I get better insight into my data to enable better business decisions? And I think that's the most important takeaway now. That's the thing that Google are looking at. Data is their concern. How do I make data accessible and use? That, I think, is what we have to do now as IT providers. We may be, for companies, software as a service platforms to make my thing, those various solutions to come up with a better answer. But it is all, how do I get the best out of the data that I have available at my hands? Whether that combining some weather data for a retailer to tell my retailer that in about 10 minutes, so that they can move their umbrellas to front of their stock on the street. It's or how do I look into the genome of coronavirus, and how do I enable how coronavirus works in the world? Taking my mobile phone data to do track and trace, to enable people to be to understand how that virus better works and transmits to the community, and who it affects. Absolutely critical now. And I think we can ask that same question time and time again now with any business. And fundamentally, the answer comes down, how do I better understand the data I have at hand, and how do I process that data in such a way? I don't want to know what happened yesterday. I want to know what's happening now, and how do I react to that now? So I think I hope I've answered the question.
Sure. We have another question. We have another question by Naveen. He's asking how working in India differs from other countries, as you have worked in different countries, and how India technologically differ.
I'm not sure. Could you just type it in the chat? I'm struggling to hear you, I'm afraid.
Yeah, you can just see in the chat box. If you just go to the chat box, you can see question and answer. There is something called as Q&A. Just click it. I think it is visible to you.
Sorry, I can't.
There's a section called as Q&A down near share screen.
Sorry, if I stop my share,
I'll read it for you again. I'll read it for you again. He's asking, how does India differ from other countries in terms of technology?
Okay. I'm not sure. I think years, and I think this is maybe a view that I'll have from joining Wipro. I've always found Indian companies were companies that I worked with that quite often were told what to do. I don't know if that's peculiar to the UK or Europe, but you have thousands of people who can do stuff. Now, I think what's changed is Indian companies, the value, I think, of the Indian really started to elevate. My understanding and what people are doing within India has, I think, changed, certainly within the last year, enormously. Wipro has amazing capabilities around data, MI, ML, infrastructure. A lot of innovation in India. And I think it's fair to say, if you look at a lot of the global companies, the leadership is more and more dominated by India. I don't know why that is particularly. I don't know if it's a cultural thing. The Indian culture is one that's a lot more open and diverse, and I think maybe it's not a technology thing necessarily. Excuse me. I think the ways of working are very different. Maybe more open. Maybe the culture India is or better with change and accepting differences and adapting. Technology-wise in India, I don't think there's any massive differences, to be honest. I think it is about culture and capability, and I find a lot of people from India are, more than able to grasp change and grasp the benefits of change. And maybe that's what my takeaway is. You guys are really good at driving things forward and seeing the positive of something different. Whereas maybe in the UK we haven't opened in the same way. So again, I'm not sure I'm answering the question.
Thanks for that, sir. Actually, you did answer the question. I think there's one more last question from Shravani. She's asking how artificial intelligence would impact the operations of any business in the future.
Gosh, enormously. I would look at Tesla as an example of this. They're using AI and ML to start to drive cars. Now, that in its own right doesn't sound like it's an amazing. But if I look at the changes that drives within that particular vertical, if a car can exist and be safe, which I think from experience, they are definitely safe. Why would I own a car? I could press a button on my phone. A car without a driver would have 2, 4, 6, 10, 20 seats. You know, what would I order? I would order a car sufficient for my need right now. It would turn up and drive me to somewhere else, just like a taxi. Great. So we don't have a taxi driver anymore. The car will probably drive itself to a charging station where it could probably be cleaned by a robot. So we don't need petrol stations. We're also not selling cars anymore, so we don't have car salesmen. An electric car is far less complex than a traditional car. So how many mechanics do we have? I think AI and ML across a lot of industries starts doing the same thing. All of us have structured data with rules-based approaches become really, really easy to automate it. So what do my accountants do now? You know, they a lot of huge amounts of change, I think, coming down the line. Will that lead to loss? Probably. Will it change the way we work? Definitely. Where do we go? I don't know. You know, I assume a lot of industries in the past where we've seen more and more automation, you know, the industrial revolution with manufacturing. Okay, people still worked more and more stuff. At the end of this time, we ended up with a 5-day week as opposed to a 7-day week. We have more leisure time. I would like to think that AI and ML is going to enable humans to have more leisure time, to have more time to, you know, deal with the really important things like the environment, and enable us more time to, you know, cooperate with one another more, while the computers deal with some of the you know, complex, maybe mundane tasks, maybe not mundane tasks. That's where we're heading towards. But I do think it's going to make massive changes to the work world. You know, I think a lot of people think about robots and think big metal things that, you know, walk about and do all that good stuff. Software robots are automating things now. The scale of them, I think, is and the capabilities and will only get better. But that's the change. I think our jobs will become more and more focused on the human interactions, while people just get on and do things. As I say, hopefully for the better. But I think it's going to be a massive change over the next 5-10 years, as you know, even more capable AI and ML models roll out. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, but she has in continuation with her question. She's telling more the such kind of applications, more the robots will be. Will it be a iRobot situation? That's what she's asking.
Sorry, can you just repeat that one again?
She's asking more the applications are being introduced using AI, more jobs it will replace, and people would not be having more jobs. Will it be a iRobot situation? That's a question, again by Shravani.
So I think the question is around applications and AI bots. And the more bots we have, I think the simple, we will have more bots, we will have more AI. They will do more and more jobs we traditionally did ourselves. And I see that.
Sorry to interrupt, sir. She is talking about iRobot movie. That's what she's pertaining with this.
Could you just type? I'm not quite catching your voice.
She's telling you it would be more of iRobot movie situation in case AI continues further.
Can you type? I can barely hear your voice.
I'll do that, sir.
Okay.
You can just look into the chat.
Ah, yeah, sorry. I have two different windows.
No problem, sir.
Ah, it's in the movie iRobot.
Yeah.
People.
1 second, sir.
I think there may be an iRobot situation. I think we had that. If we look back into the Industrial Revolution again, we had the rise of the cotton mill area, in the northwest of England. More jobs replaced. Now, are people going to agree? Well, they are, because things become cheaper, more efficient, faster. Is there going to be a robot situation? We had that, and we have that in the past. There was an organisation called Luddites that shut the cotton mills because life was changing and people's jobs was changing. But again, I say things in this world. I'd hope we can come to a world which is more like Star Trek than one like Blade Runner. I think that's on the onus is really on us to make sure that we guide society to be where we want it to be. In a world of ubiquity, if we have robots doing everything for us, well, what's left for us? Do we create art? Do we sit about doing nothing? How does that play out? I don't answer, but I think the onus is on us to drive the societal change that we want to see. Voting in a direction that gives us all a meaningful life, I think, has to be the answer. And just going back on to Nishant's comment about workers and the wages, skilled workers, I think more and more people will be running jobs that have huge impact, so they will have good remuneration. However, those who are at the lower end of a job, maybe they have messages. But I think you see that naturally in many roles. Your Windows admins, for example, I think that's now a marketplace that is becoming less and less common as we've all moved to cloud. And all of a sudden, when I move in cloud, I can deal with 1,000 machines in an instant, or 10,000 machines in an instant. That's where I think it's difficult to say. Jobs will be replaced. I'm hopeful that they will be replaced in a way that we can find meaningful lives and employment. What that means in the future, I don't know. But I really, if we can focus on the softer parts of life, if you like, everybody can do. We can have more personal trainers. In fact, if I look at the high street in the UK, we have more beauticians than I can ever imagine. But I think they're the changes. I think we become less about the job, and maybe we can find more fulfilling work that we want to do by choice, rather than having to do a job because of money it offers. But I don't have a simple answer there. It's a big complex, I guess, far beyond my pay grade.